IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy by the Takshashila Institution. I'm your host for today, Carl Jaison. I'm a Program Development Manager at the institution. And today, I've got with me Malathi Renati, who is the head of the policy school. But for the purpose of this episode, Malathi is definitely the right person we need to speak to in light of our incredible achievement at the Asiad Games. Malathi has actually played at the university and national level for Karnataka in hockey, baseball, and softball. So in this conversation with Malathi, what we will do is we will take you listeners through the governance and sports policy frameworks that are currently in place in India and how some of the governmental schemes and initiatives have helped in improving our medal count as far as the recently concluded Asiad Games were concerned. We'll also talk about the success factors that led to an incredible showing at the Games. So thanks, Malathi, for joining me today on this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. No, it's always nice to chat with you about sports. Also, we have the Cricket World Cup that's scheduled.
That's going on.
That is underway. So we have lots to talk about, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. So why don't we get started in this particular conversation on how has sports been a very major part of a social and cultural sphere, right, in somebody's life. So how do we inculcate sports in daily life and what are the benefits that somebody can reap from it? So if you could maybe we can take a step back and have a look at what are the benefits of sports in general.
I think the benefits of sports is multifold. You need to keep in mind that sport is actually a life skill. When I look back also and I think of the days when I used to play actively, it could be starting off with a practice at 5 o'clock in the morning and then going to school, ensuring that, you see through the school schedule. And then in the evening, there's practice again. So, it's helped me tremendously in terms of discipline, in terms of time management, in terms of how I can, even in teamwork. How we can motivate one another to kind of achieve a common goal. So these are skills, life skills that I'm sure any sports person out there can kind of relate to. But by and large, the benefits of sports are many. First thing that comes to the mind of many people is fitness and health. Right, that's very obvious. But the life skills that I mentioned is the second. The economic opportunities that one can get. So when you see, let's say, an IPL being organized over a 3-month period. There's this sports ecosystem that's kind of organically just sprouts around that particular city where it's being organized. Everything from merchandise that's being sold, or the ticket sales, or even the other smaller kind of ecosystems that are formed. Even sports equipment is being is sold, and there's much more of it. So the opportunities, people who get many jobs during that time to support the franchise. So we need to keep in mind that this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we've seen in terms of benefit that an IPL can do, and if that can be extended. Of course, that's a different discussion altogether. But economic opportunities are many. Job opportunities can be created. Career in sports can be enhanced, which means that the education system could kind of accommodate this. And we should not forget even the soft power and diplomacy that comes with sports. Right? Many times we've seen when there's been heated thing between India and Pakistan, it's been cricket that has maybe come and been the saving grace. Right? So I think we need to keep that in mind. And of course, the most important for many of us who are egging India on, whether it's in a cricket match or whether it's at the Asiad, when we saw many of them take the podium, is the national and the state pride that comes with it. When we have athletes representing the country, when we see the national anthem being played, or when they're stepping up onto the podium, I think that there's this goosebump kind of moment, right, that we all go through. So I think the benefits of sports are many, and we should start to kind of bring that to the forefront in our country now. I think we're ready for that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think sports is also a great leveler. in society. It's also an antidote to a lot of the issues that plagues our society, be it in terms of how we interact with each other, with our fellow citizens. So sports is a great medium for us to be able to increase the fraternity
Right.
that we so hold dearly as far as our country is concerned. I know that you've been a sports person, and while we all love to watch the sports, we love to watch our athletes, win medals. There is an underbelly to this, which is not always for very. It's not very savory, right? To say the least.
Right.
So, what has been your experience with sports bodies in India, right? And you've been in sports, which I'm going to call them non-cricket sports. So, with the assumption being that support is few and far between. So, if you could maybe share your experience of having been a sports person, how is the support system like as far as sports bodies are concerned, the government is concerned? And we will touch upon some of the schemes that have been introduced recently that have helped give an uplift to some of these sports. So yeah, a little bit on that.
Right. So for me to just get into this, right, I'll just give you a quick timeline of how the sports policy has evolved in India.
Sure.
Okay, from our independence in 1947, right, we had the first Asiad Games that was at New Delhi in 1951. But it was only in 1954 that the All India Council of Sports was actually formed. So there's no sports body per se, even before the first Asiad was hosted in India. And it took more than 28 years after 1954 for the next Asiad Games to be hosted in India, again in New Delhi, because infrastructure was there. And it was only then that the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports was actually formed. So imagine between 1947 and 1982, nothing was done substantially for sports. But we also know that many hockey medals were won at the Asiad. We were dominating it, during that period. So a lot of things have happened, and we've been lucky that some athletes have made a mark even in the international scene. But there's not much that the government played a role. And it's not like the government has to play a role, but I'm just highlighting the fact that nothing was done for sports up till 1982. Again, it was only much later, 1984, that the first sports policy came into being. And that's when the SAI, or the Sports Authority of India, was actually institutionalized, in 1984. And SAI, as you know, is kind of a household name for those in sports. And they have regional centers all over India. But again, between 84 and 2001, when there's a 17-year gap, and that... and this national sports policy was updated only after that. So in 2001, when it was updated, there was a focus then on mass participation and elite sports excellence. So that is when the government also started saying, okay, let's start looking at how we can ensure that certain sports are provided for, and there's some kind of government intervention and help being given. And so the reason I'm just mentioning all of this is not the success that we see now in the Asiad was not something that happened overnight. There were certain things that were put in place many decades ago, and though it was not the finest of frameworks or models that we had, or what the government envisioned, we have seen some success along the way because of that. Okay, which means that we know that there's a long way to go. There's a lot of things that if we just iron out the kinks, especially on the governance side, if we kind of bring in lots of checks and balances, and we leave the politicians out of this, for example, we'll see a sudden spike in the way our sports our sports or our athletes are performing internationally as well. Okay, so all this happened, and I mean, I would say most of the interventions happened between 2011 and now. So 2011 is when the National Sports Development Code was brought into place, and then that's when all the things like active lifestyle, youth development, employment opportunities, all of these started being actually put as part of the charter. Earlier, it might have been just been sports very broadly, but here very specific goals or objectives are being put into the charter. And in 2014, when the National Youth Policy came into effect, is when the TOPS, or the Target Olympic Podium Scheme, TOPS as an acronym, was introduced back in 2014. And in the TOPS, what happens is that there are elite athletes. Elite, again, the definition of elite here are those who are representing the country. playing at the highest level. These athletes are identified, and then they're funded for. All their needs are taken care of, and they're also kind of given opportunities to travel abroad, have access to specialists. So very few athletes were identified to be part of the Target Olympic Podium Scheme back in 2014, and those athletes you'll see are the ones who have kind of achieved a lot in the international scene as well. So and in 2017 the Khelo India scheme came into being. I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. And then in 2019 was more the Fit India movement. You would have heard the Prime Minister himself has been part of many of those narratives. And then the National Centre of Excellence sort of started developing, and the National Centre of Excellence is where the research happens, where there is a whole ecosystem around every athlete's performance and how they can kind of improve their benchmarks that they have put in place, so that they can really apply themselves at an international level, and they're familiar with that sort of environment. So now earlier it used to be just Patiala, which had the National Centre of Excellence. Now we have it also in Bangalore, and there's another one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Lucknow.
Okay.
So that's sort of been the journey of where we are. And finally, I'd just like to just mention here that we have the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. So when you look at the national level, that's the ministry. And then you have all the SAI, which is the Sports Authority of India, which have regional centers. And then every sport has to have a National Sport Federation, NSF.
Yeah.
So any sport, be it cricket, be it wrestling, be it wushu, or any sport which is an Olympic or non-Olympic sport, has to have a National Sports Federation associated with it. So this is the body that will essentially have their elections, which will kind of devote their time for that particular sport. And the NSFs have to have a certain code of conduct and certain guidelines and rules in place, so that they can also be tagged to the International Sports Federation for their sport. So let's say you have a wrestling, International Wrestling Federation. Then the National Sport Federation for Wrestling has to be then associated with the international, so that any rules and regulations that have to be followed at the international level is then passed down also and followed at that level.
I think FIFA also would be an example of that.
Which is why recently we had a fallout where the Indian football team was not allowed to play because they did not have did not follow the guidelines set with respect to the elections, which has to happen at a certain frequency time. But that was our Indian Football Association was not conducting it at that time, that frequency. So they were not allowed to play those sports. So it's very important that tie-up happens so that our players can then represent at the international level also.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is by and large how the structure is currently.
No, this is quite fascinating, and I would strongly urge people to just check out some of the show notes that we'll be putting out for this episode, which will link to some of the data that Malathi just spoke about. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take a quick break and we'll be back and resume the conversation.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
All right, we are back with this conversation. So I'm speaking with Malathi on our sports policies and frameworks in the country. So let's come to why we're having this conversation. That's really our, as I said earlier in the conversation, our incredible showing at the Asian Games, where we've bagged 107 medals, no small feat. Our previous best was at 2018 Jakarta, where we finished with 70 medals with 16 goals. So it's gone up to 35 goals. So that's always a good sign. So what we'll do in the next part of this conversation is really highlight the success factors, right? And of course, there would be seen and unseen sort of factors here at play. But we're going to focus on 5 key factors that we believe led to this sort of performance by the Indian contingent. So Malathi, you want to just maybe get us started on what are those success factors, and then maybe we can share some interesting case studies that we've come across from our research. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So yeah, I think the first one I would consider would be the funding, right? Unless we spend big, we won't win big, because much of the infrastructure we have is sort of lacking with respect to the international standards. And though certain, like SAI and other the National Center of Excellence, they might be having those. We need much more of it to kind of be able for our athletes to be able to perform at the highest level. And compete at the highest level. So I think there's a lot of money that had been put into and funding that has happened, and this comes predominantly from the government. It would be more from the National Sports Development Fund, and the National Sports Development Fund is mainly from the public sector, PSUs, and the public sector banks. But however, in 2013, the private sector companies, they could also contribute as part of the CSR, and this has kind of helped tremendously from with respect to the CSR funding that has come in.
Yeah, actually, on that, one of the sort of case studies here that I came across was the archery, right? And it is one of the sports that we ended up with a huge medal tally. And interestingly, the government actually spent 24 crores between 2022-23, right? So this would be a financial year 22-23. And this also became possible because of a tie-up with NTPC. So as you said, that
Right.
the public sector is front and center in a lot of these funding schemes. So it was a deal that was worth almost 115 crores over a period of 5 years. And with an additional 15 crore for a one-time support, to build up the infrastructure. So archery has benefited very clearly from very focused sort of approach by the government. As I said, around 24 crores just to get that sports infrastructure in place. We've also been able to hire some of the best coaches. So some South Korea and Italy, neuroscience experts from the US. The coaches have been exposed to international seminars. We've also spent about 3 crores is what has been reported on national camps, where psychologists, nutritionists have been employed with also video analysis software, because that's really the key. You need to sort of track performance and see where the improvements and gaps are. So as you said, the funding has been a major reason why I think India overall, but especially a sport like archery has done really well.
Yeah. And shooting is another one which actually fetched us many goals. I think 20, if I'm not mistaken. 20, shooting was, around 22 medals. We fetched the most from that, which was the second after athletics. Yeah. So, in fact, just to add to that, many of the athletes who participated in the Asiad, they were, for example, people like Avinash Sable for the 3,000 meter steeplechase that he won the gold for, and even Parul Chowdhury, who was a silver medalist for the women's steeplechase, but she also won the gold in the 5,000 meters. Both of them, along with many of the other middle and long distance runners, benefited from an extended period of expert training at the Colorado Springs in the US. And this was the run-up to the Asiad. So they spent a lot of time, in such kind of where there's infrastructure, where there are facilities, where they have coaches, experts who can help them, push themselves and reach those the marks that would not have been possible had they been training with our facilities. So I think that's important, and they couldn't have done it if they did not have the funds. Right, and the backing. So, and that's the other important thing is that the private sponsorships that we're seeing of late, you see that in Odisha as well, with JSW and the Tatas and Reliance also recently. Just this morning, I read in the papers that they've tied up now in Mumbai, where the Reliance Sports will be kind of helping improve on the facilities for Olympics, for athletes training for the Olympics. So all these are good signs. When we see success happening, at such a large scale, and then you suddenly have this movement that is happening where people are more interested, which means that the markets can then kind of play their role of ensuring that there's more reach. And the society automatically starts getting interested in that, and then they're seeing the potential that sports has. So this is a nice time to be. This is a nice moment even for sports in India. Yeah. Okay. The second thing I would like to just mention here is, which was a success factor, was to identify talent, essentially to catch these athletes young. Talent scouting at a young age has actually helped many female athletes from countries like Australia and China dominate the sports on the global stage. So just as in a comparison, right? But so for us, the talent spotting and the grassroots, the different initiatives that have happened at the grassroots level has been kind of critical and has sort of paid off. So if you look at Anahat Singh, who's just 15, but he has got 2 bronze medals in squash. Aditi Swami, who's 17 years old and has won the gold in archery. And we have Isha Singh, who's won 4 medals. She's just 18 years old and 4 medals, basically 1 gold and 3 silvers in shooting. So this would not have been possible had we not had programs in place which identify talent young. And this could be in the remotest parts of India. And that was very heartwarming to see many of the athletes who have taken to the podium in this Asiad were from those sort of families. And just to see that the pride on their faces, when they had to step up onto the podium and to see the India flag going up. And I'm sure that they're the first generation sports people in their families.
Absolutely.
And that will bring an immense change in the whole community and how they would recognize sports people, the opportunities they see for youngsters, whether it's male or female. And as a result, the community also kind of will encourage and promote sports right within. So I think these schemes, some of the schemes that have kind of helped, I'll be mentioning that a little later. But that has we've seen the benefits of it in this Asiad also. The next reason I would like to highlight is the fact that we need to kind of back our women athletes. Okay, and there are many reasons for this, because getting families to let their girls take up sports, even wear sports gear, or leave home to train at the district or states level, right? And because the safety factor comes in. All these things, right? We need to kind of remove these hurdles so that all genders can then start participating, in sports in a healthy and a safe environment, right? So just to give some statistics, out of the 107 medals that India won, 46 went to the Indian women, and there were 8 also who were won in the mixed team events category. But so totally 54 medals. If you see as the contribution, and this is sort of it pays off, in the long run, because then we have more athletes participating. We have a safer and a healthier environment once we create that from the ground up, and we'll definitely see a big spike in the numbers for sure.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at even the Olympic medals that were won by Indian women. For the first time when Maleshwari won the bronze at the 2000 Sydney Olympics in weightlifting. And since then, there's been no looking back. Mary Kom and Saina Nehwal won in the London 2012. PV Sindhu and Sakshi Malik are some household names now who won at the Olympics in the Rio Olympics in 2016. And so, now we have PV Sindhu, we have, the boxers who are kind of also making a mark. So I think once we have role models and they are from, let's say women who have done well, others too will then start to take to the sport. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, no, I actually absolutely agree. I think the significance of having role models is underrated, right. Especially in a game like sports. And I think this is going to massively see an uptake in more girls, women participating in sport in general. And yeah, I mean it's always nice to see that women's participation in sport can also lead to other sort of benefits for them, both in terms of status, in terms of economic benefits. So yeah, it's net is always going to it's always going to be a good sign.
So the fourth reason I would like to just highlight is, and I'm sure it's very evident when we have seen how our sports persons have been taken to the field, is the mental strength. Right? Or because mental health is a very key factor. So our athletes now are showing that fighting spirit. Right? They're no longer just participating in a sporting event. They're going out there and they want to win. And you see the swag in their body language. I mean, you see that, right? When you see a Neeraj Chopra throw the javelin, and he knows that's a winning throw, right? You see that, you see his body language. So I think it's important, and that's a very nice shift. And this has not just happened because the sports persons now are more motivated. It's happened because there's a huge support system behind it. They are coaches. They are, there are different sizes. I guess, Carl, you can share the numbers in case you have the data with you. But we have a whole support system who kind of ensure that these people are even mentally tough. We've seen that with cricket. Cricket, I think, over the last, especially decade or so, has kind of seen a huge jump in terms of the mental toughness of our cricket players on the field. And now we're seeing this even in the playing out in athletics and in other sports as well. And that's really a very encouraging factor.
Yeah.
But like I said, there's a huge there's a support system behind that has made that happen. And that's something that we need to ensure continues. And again, this comes because of the funds and other things. When you have top mental health coaches who kind of can help ensure that whether it's a team event or whether it's an individual event, that they're able to kind of get that mental strength and it kicks in at the right time, at the right moment to achieve what they want.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think the exposure and the access to some of these facilities is what has always been missing, right? And it's great to, and it's heartwarming to know that we do take something like mental health in sport very seriously. And hence, why we've spent almost 3 crores, as I had mentioned earlier, with the archery team to get them in top condition, ready for the games. And the results are there to see for all of us. So, I mean, I think the baseline really is how can we provide access to these facilities to our sports persons, and and I do hope there's still investment that's given to this area, very important area that you highlighted. So
and the last one that I'd like to mention, again, I'm mentioning these government schemes, but it doesn't mean that this is the be all and end all and the success factor moving forward. And there are other areas where we need to kind of have proper policies in place. And I'll just maybe touch upon that a little later. But currently, the schemes that have really helped and why we've seen the success that we have seen in this Asia is also because of the TOPS, that is the Target Olympic Podium Scheme that I just mentioned a little earlier. This was started by the government of India back in 2014. And the overall objective of this was to identify and support potential medal prospects for the Olympics and the Paralympics. So that was the objective. And under this scheme, there's a committee essentially that is constituted to identify athletes who have the potential to win an Olympic medal for the country. And those athletes are then kind of supported to the fullest extent. In fact, if we look at what the scheme has done, I'll just to give you a few numbers. The TOPS has accommodated now the scheme, which initially was accommodating 75 athletes, now is accommodating 285. So this is for the development, and there's a development and core group, and the idea is that we kind of extend this. And so you'll notice that there are a lot of not just bouquets in terms of appreciation that comes from different people, but there's also a lot of monetary rewards that these athletes are getting when they win.
What's the duration for an athlete who's part of the top scheme, for instance?
So there's no duration as such. So you're looking at, let's say, the next Olympics, right? You're planning for the next Olympics, or you're planning for any other major event like the Asiad. So when that happens, there's a lot of many years of planning to develop an individual whom you see potential for. And so when you catch them young, let's say you're bringing in a 13-year-old. In fact, in this Asiad, just to highlight, there was a swimmer, he's 13-year-old, who is the current 200-meter freestyle swimming national champion. Now, though she didn't make it to the finals obviously in a pool full of Chinese and Japanese swimmers, just that exposure and that experience, right, will put her in good stead for the next major event. So, ensuring that these people are part of this, the scheme was important, because then they have the support, the monetary support and all the other support they need in terms of coaches, to kind of develop and ensure that the potential is being fulfilled. Okay. So the other scheme that has really helped is the Khelo India program. Okay. Now the Khelo India program has 3 different. It has the Khelo India Youth Games that are conducted regularly all over India. It has the Khelo School Games. Again, identifying it helps to kind of to identify talent young, and the Khelo India University Games. Now this you've noticed over the last many years, right? It's become a regular. You start seeing this Khelo India University Games or Khelo India School Games happening. And that's because it was introduced back in 2017. And this, if we continue with this trend, we will be able to identify, talent young, and then see who have the potential, and then they can start growing up the ladder in terms of on the sports side. So these are the top 5. So spending, that's the funding, very important. Second is to identify talent and catch them young. Third would be to back a woman and ensure that the women athletes also are able to empower them. The fourth would be the mental health. That was another factor which kind of helped. There's a difference between a medal and being out of the top 3. Yeah. And the fourth is the schemes that we've had. So these 5, I would think, are the ones that have really helped for us to achieve the numbers that we did.
No, yeah, I mean, I think this is helpful. I mean, we'd like listeners to tell us if there are other success factors. So maybe you can share your thoughts wherever you listen to this podcast on. So yeah, with that, I think this was just one of many conversations I'm sure that we'll be having over the course of the next few weeks, Malathi. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. We will be back with more episodes where we specifically look at how sports policy and initiatives are evolving here in India. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back with another episode soon. Take care.
Thanks, Carl. Bye-bye.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.